Welcome back to the video classes, dear students. So now in this session we shall discuss about one more physiological process, that is imbibition. Imbibition is nothing but a special kind of diffusion only. So what do you mean by diffusion? It is the movement of molecules from the region of their higher concentration towards the region of their lower concentration until equilibrium is reached on both the sides is called as diffusion. And imbibition, we are speaking about imbibition in this session. So imbibition is also a special kind of diffusion. But here what happens is water molecules are absorbed by the solids or colloids. Say for example, let me give you an example, dry seeds. So what happens when you place the dry seeds, or what happens when you soak the dry seeds in water? After a few hours, these dry seeds, they absorb water and they will swell in their size so that their volume increases. So this is an example for imbibition. So what exactly is happening here? See, imbibition is nothing but a special kind of diffusion where the water is absorbed by the solids or colloids, which cause them to increase in their volume. As soon as the dry seeds are soaked in the water, they absorb water molecules. What are they doing? They will be absorbing water molecules. As soon as they absorb the water molecules, they will swell in their size. So they enlarges, their volume increases. And this is due to the process, physiological process called as imbibition. And one more example let me give you. See, during winters, you feel very difficulty to shut the wooden doors and open the wooden doors because it will be stuck to the frame. Why? During winters, due to this imbibition, what happens? Due to the presence of moisture content in air, these wooden doors, they absorb water, they will increase in their volume enormously. And thus, as they increase in their volume enormously, it will be a very difficult task to open the wooden doors or to shut the wooden doors. So it will be sticking there. So it will be stucking there. So this is also an example for imbibition. And imbibition can be seen even in case of cellulose, pectin, lignin, gelatin. So you might have heard about the gelatin. You might have heard about the gelatin which is used in making the jellies. So when we add water to that, it will increase in its volume. So even here we can come across the presence of a process called as imbibition. So the classic examples for the absorption of water, that is imbibition, are seeds as well as dry wood. And the pressure that is produced by the swelling of wood had been used by prehistoric man to split rocks and boulders. So before going to this, see, I told you those substances or those solids or colloids which absorbs water, they will increase in their size enormously. That process, that physiological process is called as imbibition. Whereas these substances are called as imbibants. So these solid substances, so here we have taken seed as an example. So now this seed, it is absorbing water. So those substances which are absorbing water are called as imbibants. And water is called as, it is called as imbibate. Don't get confused. So imbibant is nothing but seed or wooden door here, whereas water, it is the substance absorbed by the imbibants. So the water is called as imbibate. That means imbibants absorb imbibate to increase in their volume enormously. And this process is called as imbibition. So this process is called as imbibition, and this physiological process, it was used by ancient men to split the rocks and boulders. Boulders in the sense large stones. So to crack open them, so this technique was used. Say for example, if there is any cracks here, they used to use woodens here, and this process of imbibition is used. As a result, it is used in splitting up of these large rocks as well as boulders. And during imbibition, these particles of imbibants in the sense, here we are speaking about the seed. Seed, it is nothing but the solid or colloid which is involved in the absorption of water and increase in its size enormously. So this is called as imbibant. So the particles which are present inside the imbibant, they will be producing certain pressure during the process imbibition. And the pressure exerted by the molecules of imbibants during imbibition is called as imbibition pressure. What do we call for that? It is called as imbibition pressure. So what do you mean by imbibition pressure? So imbibition pressure is nothing but imbibition pressure is nothing but the pressure exerted by what molecules? Imbibant molecules. The pressure exerted by imbibant molecules during the process of imbibition is called as imbibition pressure, and this imbibition pressure is more. So when these water molecules are absorbed by the seeds, so the particles of seeds are called as imbibants. So it will be exerting certain pressure, and that is called as imbibition pressure. And using this pressure only, these rocks and boulders were split in the prehistoric times by ancient men. And emerging of seedling opening into the soil is also due to the imbibition. So once the seeds, always dry seeds will never sprout, only those soaked seeds will sprout. Why? Because it is due to the imbibition pressure, and due to the imbibition pressure, these embryonal axes, they will be sprouting outside, they will be opening outside, and thus it is involved in the sprouting. Imbibition also, here also the movement of water molecules will be along the concentration gradient. It will also occur along the concentration gradient. That is, when we take a bowl full of water and we place seeds in them, always water molecules moves from the region of their higher water potential or higher water concentration towards the region of the lower water concentration. So water potential is more in water, whereas it is less in seeds, and thus along the gradient there will be the diffusion of water molecules, and even this is the case in case of imbibition also. And then for any substance to imbibe any liquid, there should be an affinity between the adsorbent as well as the liquid. See, there should be an affinity between the imbibant and imbibate. See, when the imbibants are seeds and imbibate is water, there is a greater affinity between these two. Seeds always absorb water efficiently. But when we try soaking these seeds in oil, so if we are taking oil and in that if we are soaking the seeds, does they soak? No, there is no affinity between the seeds as well as oil, and thus imbibition will not occur. Only imbibition will occur when we soak the seeds in water. So this affinity between the imbibant and imbibate, it matters a lot. So if there is more affinity between the imbibant and imbibate, more will be the rate of imbibition. See, the rate of imbibition, it is controlled by certain factors like temperature as well as the texture of imbibant. Even it also depends upon the affinity also. So far we have spoken about the affinity between the imbibant and imbibate for the process called as imbibition. See, it is also controlled by, it is also depending upon the temperature. As the temperature increases, the rate of imbibition also increases. As the temperature decreases, the rate of imbibition also decreases. How? You might have experienced this in your kitchen. See, when you want to soak the seeds in a shorter duration of time, you pour hot water to that. So when you soak seeds in hot water, the seeds will soak very fastly within a short period of time. So if we soak the seeds in normal cold water, it takes a long hours for soaking. So as the temperature increases, kinetic energy of water molecules also increases, and thus rate of imbibition also increases. As the temperature decreases, kinetic energy of water molecules decreases, and thus rate of imbibition also decreases. Higher the temperature, more will be the rate of imbibition. Lesser the temperature, lesser will be the rate of imbibition. And then it also depends upon the texture. It also depends upon the texture of imbibant. Imbibant in the sense it is a substance. It may be solid which is involved in the absorption of water. Say for example seeds. So keep this in mind. So the substance that enables faster diffusion of water imbibe more water. Say for example wooden doors. So inside the wooden doors diffusion takes place at a faster rate. So their imbibition also occurs at a faster rate. It also occurs at a faster rate. But how about the iron tables? Have you ever seen the imbibition in iron tables? Have you ever seen the enlargement of them? No, never. Because in iron, the molecules, the solid molecules are very compactly arranged. As a result, there is no room for diffusion of water. And thus, in such kind of solids, imbibition will never take place. Whereas, in case of wooden tables, so in case of wooden tables, there will be a room or space in between the molecules. There will be a space in between the molecules. So even though they are compactly arranged, there is little gap over there, and thus diffusion takes place. As a result, imbibition also occurs in wooden tables but not in iron. Why iron? In iron, the molecules are very compactly arranged, so there is no room for diffusion. And thus, in those substances, diffusion takes place. If the diffusion is taking place at a faster rate, it also imbibes the more water. If diffusion is not occurring in a given substance, imbibition will also not occur, because imbibition is also a special kind of diffusion only. Here also there will be the movement of water molecules along the concentration gradient, that is from higher water potential towards the lower water potential. Okay, so now let us know how the transportation of different substances in our plants takes place. So here they has given us long distance transport of water. But before going to that, we shall know how the movement of different substances takes place within the plant body. See, I told you there are different substances which are moving inside the plant body, like water, minerals, organic nutrients, inorganic nutrients. Everything will be moving inside the plant body. And these substances might be moving within the cell. So there may be the shorter distance transport of certain substances taking place, or some of the molecules like water, food, materials, mineral ions, they have to travel through the length of the body. So there the substances will be moving over longer distances. So we shall know how the longer distance of transport of water or other substances takes place inside the plant body. See, so roots, they are involved in the absorption of water and mineral nutrients. So if the roots has to absorb the water, here also imbibition takes place or diffusion takes place. So once roots are the only organs which are involved in the absorption of water. So once roots absorb water, this water has to reach to the heights of the plant. So it has to reach to the tip of the plant, because roots are the only organs involved in the absorption of water. So now this absorbed water has to reach stem, branches, leaves, even at the top of the plant. So if it has to occur, it does not just happen due to the process called as diffusion. See, over shorter distances, that means within the cell or in between the cells, if the transport of molecules has to take place, it may occur due to diffusion. But if the water has to reach to the tip of the plant or tree through the diffusion, it may take several hours because it is a very slow process. And one more thing, let me tell you. See, leaves, they are involved in the manufacturing of their own food materials by the process called as photosynthesis. So they are involved in the manufacture of their organic nutrients. And the leaves, they are involved in the synthesis of food materials. And these food materials has to be reached to the stem, roots, flowers and other branches also. So the movement of water or food materials cannot take place by simple process called as diffusion. And for that purpose, in our plants, the bulk movement of substances takes place through the conducting tissues or vascular tissues, and that is called as translocation. So what do you mean by translocation? It is nothing but the bulk movement of substances. What substances? It might be water or organic materials which are prepared by the plants as food. It has to be conducted throughout the parts of the body of the plant. So the bulk movement of these substances through the conducting tissues like xylem and phloem or vascular tissues of plants is called as translocation. What do we call for this? That is called as translocation. And thus, as there are two kinds of vascular tissues present inside our plant body, there are two kinds of translocation occurring inside our plant body, namely xylem translocation and phloem translocation. So as there are two types of vascular tissues like xylem and phloem are involved, and these are involved in the conduction of the substances. So bulk movement of substances takes place by these two, and thus it is called as xylem translocation and phloem translocation. See, what do you mean by xylem? Xylem, it is a water conducting tissue, whereas phloem is a food conducting tissue. So xylem translocation, it is mainly related to the roots. See, roots they are involved in the absorption of water. So here xylem translocation is mainly from roots to the aerial parts. That means the water, it is absorbed by the roots, and from here water will be translocated to the aerial parts. And it passes water with mineral salts like organic nitrogen as well as hormones. So xylem translocation, it is involved in the translocation of water from roots to aerial parts, and it also is involved in the translocation of water with mineral ions as well as hormones and nitrogen also. So this is called as xylem translocation. So the bulk movement of substances that takes place inside the xylem from roots to the aerial parts of the plant is called as xylem translocation. Whereas phloem translocation, it involves the transportation of food materials, especially organic materials, from the leaves to the other needy parts of the plant body is called as phloem translocation. So what do we call for that? It is called as phloem translocation. And this phloem translocation, it creates a positive hydrostatic pressure. It creates a positive hydrostatic pressure inside the phloem. So what kind of pressure it creates? So phloem translocation creates positive hydrostatic pressure inside the phloem, whereas xylem translocation, inside here it exerts negative pressure. So it exerts negative hydrostatic pressure inside the xylem. What do you mean by negative? So negative pressure in the sense against the gravity. So negative in the sense against the gravity, positive in the sense towards the gravity. See, what do you mean by hydrostatic pressure? So hydrostatic, hydro in the sense water, static in the sense at resting. So any fluids at rest will be exerting certain pressure, or at equilibrium they will be exerting certain pressure, and it is called as hydrostatic pressure. So hydrostatic pressure is the pressure that is exerted by any fluid at resting or equilibrium at any given point due to the force of gravity. So this pressure is exerted due to the force of gravity. So that is called as hydrostatic pressure. Simply I'll tell, hydro means water. Keep this in mind. Hydro means water or any fluid. At rest, static means at rest. So any fluid that exerts pressure at rest is called as hydrostatic pressure. So hydrostatic pressure is positive inside phloem. So inside phloem, as it is a food conducting tissue, it is positive in nature. That means the molecules can move towards the gravity. So it can move towards the gravity and thus it is positive. Whereas inside the xylem, water molecules always moves against the gravity. See, roots are the only organs which are involved in the absorption of water, and once it is absorbed, water molecules always have to move upwards. They will never move in any other directions. So it is always against the gravity. As it is against the gravity, against means it gives a negative hydrostatic pressure. So always inside the xylem there will be negative pressure, whereas inside the phloem it will be having positive hydrostatic pressure. And thus the mass flow is the movement of substances in bulk or en masse. So in bulk is also called as en masse, from one point to another as a result of pressure difference between the 2 points. So in between the 2 points there will be pressure differences existing, and thus due to the existing of these pressures there will be the bulk movement of substances taking place inside the plant body. And it is the characteristic feature of a mass flow that substances, whether in solution or suspension, are swept along at the same pace. So here solutions will be swept along the same pace here. That is, bulk flow can be achieved either through a positive hydrostatic pressure gradient or a negative hydrostatic pressure gradient. So that means, see, in bulk flow, in case of phloem, see, the movement of bulk movement of substances takes place in multi-direction. See, if there is a leaf which is involved in the production of or synthesis of food materials, so this food materials has to be translocated to various parts. So from here food materials may move upwards or downwards or sideways. So it is multi-directional in nature. So in here we can find the presence of positive hydrostatic pressure. That means even the food materials will be moving towards the gravity. So that is called as positive hydrostatic pressure. Or the bulk flow of that means water molecules and other substances, mineral ions, takes place only in one single direction, that is against the gravity. So that is called as negative hydrostatic pressure. So negative means it creates a suction force. It creates a suction force. We will come to know about the suction force in detail when I explain you about the transpiration. So we shall speak about that in detail there. So that is called as the negative hydrostatic pressure, and due to that water rises inside the xylem and it reaches to the tipmost of the trees, which are hundreds of meters height in nature. And the bulk movement of substances through the conducting or vascular tissues of plant is called as translocation, as I already told you.